I'll come down, right?
How? Akatia ke la tēnā tātou. Tēnā tātou ke roto tūri o tēnei whare. Tēnei whare ke utoi mai rā i a tātou, kai mi tēnei kaupapa e karangāti. Anore rā nau mai haere mai. Nau mai haere mai. Kia tōre ia kai nui tētahi whakamoiniti. Engari mohe o te whānui tea te karakiane. Ko te karaki o te atu. Koina ko tātai tēnei. Mei mai. E te atua te hungia mātau, e te karaiti te hungia mātau. E te atua te hungia mātau, e tō mātau matu i te rangi. Kia taku tōne mua, kia tai mai tō rangatiratanga. Kia mei te atāru e kai ai ki runga ki te whenua. Kia rete ana o tō te rangi. O mai te mātou e nei tau mātou mō tēnei rā. Ura o mātou hara. Me mātou o ki e muru nei o te runga e harana kia mātou. Awa o ki mātou e kau e kia whakawaia. Engari whakaorangia mātou ki te kiro. Nō ki te rangatiratanga. Te kaha me te korohia. Ake, 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 ake. Ka tira he peko he tangi wha, he peko he tangi. Timata hi ai konei, ke tai rā kai nui aha kare mata. Ka puri tāku nei titiro ki tēnā. A tau puri, nau nei ingoa tia, e te o tō hati, no reira kāmi. Tai no atu ki tēnā kuao, te whakatakotora me ena ngā kingi mai a pōtatau, tāwhiao, mahuta, tērata, koro ki te airangi kāhu, kai hoki rā ki atu heitia e noho nei i tūmu tawhito o tōna mātua tika. Pai mai. Pai mai. Ko koe ki e whakaatu ki te raukawa kākiru. Koe nā hoki ngā mihi ki o tātou nei mate. Koutou rā, kai tēnā marae, kai tēnā marae, kai tēnā marae o tatai. E nai pika hea e rātou kia whāriki hea i konei, kia mihi, kia tangi, kia tukuru porakora kia rātou, kia haere. Nō reira koutou rā, hoki atu, haere atu. Haere ki te te wāhi tuturu matau o te tangata. A koe nā tātou ngā mahuetanga o koutou, kia pikau hea ngā wawata, ngā tūmanako, mō tā uri whakaheke kai mira i a tāpā. Nō reira, kai ngā uri o kora eupo, kai ngā uri o tā kitinu, haramaia. Haramai ki tēnei e karanga nei me ki rā mai i tā koutou rōku, o tātou te Wairoa, e mihi, haere mai ka wea mai o koutou whakaaro, kia whariki hea mō waira hei horahi mā tātou kei ngā tau kai. Nō reira tēnei te mihi, te koa kia ki te mai ngā kanohi, tēnā koutou, a tēnā koutou, a tēnā koutou. Tira mana iwe, tātou, tātou re, tūtira mai ngā iwe, tātou, tātou re, whai a te maramatanga, me te aroa ai iwe, kia KOTAHITANGA, kia KOTAHITANGA, tātou, tātou re, Kei konei tō tātou nei tia mana leo, nā he timata tanga mo tō tātou nei koe.
Kia ora tātou, my name is Leon Simons. If you don't know me, I'm the chairperson of TAHI of the Wairoa Trust. And I'd just like to thank Peter in his words of introduction of MAHI and Kotoko and everyone. Obviously, here today we've got one of our trustees present from TAHI of the Wairoa Trust. As you recall, 12 months ago we sought your ratification in terms of our deed of settlement and formalising our historical claims with the Crown, as well as ratifying the post-settlement government sentiment, which is the PSG, which is Tato with the Wairoa Trust. So basically we ran through an election process there, and through your kahu clusters, 14 trustees were elected to represent your interests in terms of the post-settlement government sentiment. So I'd just like to welcome everyone today. This is our 5th of 9 we call them engagement Hui around the country. We obviously want to come out to our members to obviously present ourselves as this is the trust that you have elected, that are looking after your interests, but as well as that we need some of your input in terms of the MAHI forward, in terms of what we need to do. So that's what we're here to do today. I'd just like to obviously acknowledge those other trustees present here. I'll just get them to stand up and introduce themselves, starting at the back there at the registration desk, and moving around the room.
I'm Hamilton, and I'm the trustee for Wairoa Cluster 1, which is Tahi Marae, Paul Kaiwati, and Tiaki Wai is another marae there, Ngāti Kuru Pakiaka and others. And yeah, it's me, thank you.
Kia ora mo tātou whakapāna mai whānui hui mai hei. Ko Tiapuna Kamasita Marata Pūmua. I live in Fraistown. My parents in Turi Morel. My mother was now for the Hukai Kāranga at Puti Marama Mākuru Marae, and my dad was from Whakatua Marae. I'm the representative for Ngāti Mahi.
Kia ora tātou katoa. I'm Hui Ruata. I'm the trustee for Hine Manuri, Ngā Tokorima Hine Manuri.
Kia ora ngā o Tomotu, tēnā koutou katoa, ko apia te tāhini au, no te reinga tōku marae, along with many others. I'm one of the representatives for the Wairoa Waikaramawana Māori Trust.
Kia ora, I'm from Whānau from Nuago let me out for a few weeks, so it's good to come and good to see you. So yeah, I'm trying to do some mahi for our iwi and Wairoa.
My name is Billy Munro. I'm the trustee, or one of the 2 trustees for Whakatini Wiabu. As Whakatini Tia
And thank you very much. My name is obviously Leon Simons, and I'm one of the 2 trustees for Runga that are on the trust. Also, obviously, there's another 7 other trustees who can't be with us here today. Obviously, they bring their welcome and support. And about to view what in the presentation, what's in the booklet, or what the trustees have been doing over the past 6 to 7 months. So obviously, there's been 2 key work streams we've been working on. Obviously, the settlement itself has to pass through legislation, the House of Representatives. We'll get an update on that and where it's at. And obviously last year when we went around and sought your ratification support on the deed of settlement, a part of that was what we called the work plan. And the work plan was basically during the pre-settlement phase when Te Tira Whakiemi was negotiating with the Crown, it couldn't quite agree on what the final PSG or post-settlement government entity was supposed to be and what supposed to look like. So rather than hold up our settlement and have those discussions then, it was a division of the negotiators and the mandate of reps at that time to obviously proceed with the settlement and then come into the post-settlement phase to have that discussion now. So basically this is the start of this discussion. As you see in the booklet, it's quite an extensive process that we want to run through in terms of consultating and engaging with our members to get their feedback on. Obviously at the end of the day, it's our members' decision about how we make that final decision. We want to leave that in your hands, but we need your feedback and your guidance to give us some direction in terms of going forward and some of the questions we need to ask. And obviously the two big questions obviously contained in the booklet and in the presentation just about to see. There's obviously around asset ownership arrangements and also governance representation. Two key questions, two key concepts that we need your thoughts on. And part of each of those two concepts have been looked at a high level in terms of concepts. Obviously there's a spectrum of options we can look at, but the presentation will outline, as well as in the booklet, what those options are, from complete, obviously, devolution of assets and representation to complete amalgamation of assets and representation. So we just want to briefly touch on the context around why we're here, what we need for our members to do. And obviously another key part that I haven't mentioned yet is registrations. Obviously we need to drive those registrations. Currently we have 6,500 members registered. Obviously through the census data, we have 34,000 members out there we think that belong to back at home at the Iwi and Hamilton Engagement Hui. So we want everyone to drive that registration, continue to push the whānau to get registered, to get involved, to participate in this process, so then everyone's informed about what we do in terms of the settlement and what happens with it going forward to the future. So I'd just like to also, if you haven't registered or signed your tenants or checked the registration details at the back, there's some trustees manning that. We've got admin support in the corner, just making notes for the trustees, so when they take all this feedback back to our trustee meeting, we're able to note. So if you do, when you do get up in the Q&A section, which is after the presentation, just say your name so we just kind of know where the feedback's coming from. So basically today is broken into two sections. We've got the presentation, which is a reflection on the booklet. We want to have a short Q&A session in between. That's basically just having questions if you have regarding the process of the settlement up to date, as well as the process going forward. Obviously, in the second part is a workshop around values, aspirations and principles, as well as looking at the concepts we're about to present to you in terms of the asset ownership and governance representation. Okay, and then after that we'll break for a cup of tea and a coffee. And, yeah,
Someone should just stop, please. Does anyone else need papers?
Health and safety. Obviously you can see the exits are clearly labelled. Exit, this way. And as you came in through the narrow corridor, the toilets are just out the back there before you pass through the double doors into the next floor area. So, up. Okay. Without further ado, we'll make a start with the presentation and go.
Our history is a many-layered history. It is a complex history. It is a history where we fought with the Crown. It is a history where we fought against the Crown.
The word te arawhiti means bridge and refers to something that connects items together. It also refers to a journey towards enlightenment or knowledge.
Today is about two big things. It is remembrance, it is remembering our past, it is remembering those who laid the pathway for us, and it's about celebrating this day. This is not the end of our journey, this is just one part of it. And in receiving the Crown's apology and signing the deed of settlement, it is those three instruments that together that will then allow us to turn around our waka and face it back towards the sun.
Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai, haere mai. Thank you for joining us today for our first round of engagement hui on where we are at and what we need to do. We are Tātou o te Wairoa Trust, the post-settlement governance entity for the iwi and hapu of te rohe o te Wairoa. it is our responsibility on behalf of our iwi and hapu to manage the redress that will be received as part of our settlement with the Crown. We are almost through the final stages of our journey to settle all of our historical Treaty of Waitangi claims. We are also in the process of transitioning from our negotiating body, Te Tira Whakaemi o Te Wairoa, to our PSGE Tātou Tātou o Te Wairoa. Today's hui is an opportunity to hear more about the process, what we as the Trust have been up to, and the next steps, where to from here. What you tell us during this engagement hui is critical to help shape the thinking on our future representative structure, which currently has 7 kāhui or clusters and about asset ownership arrangements. The presentation is approximately 30 minutes long. Following this presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask questions, and then we will break into smaller groups to workshop some of the kōrero. The workshops are a chance for you to provide feedback and raise any initial thoughts. We have allocated 30 minutes for the questions and answers. Following the workshop session, we will have a cup of tea so you can meet your representatives and our support teams who are here today. If you are not yet a registered member of Tātou Tātou o Te Wairoa, we can help you to register today. We are holding 9 hui across Aotearoa, in Wairoa, Ahuriri Napier, Te Whanganui Ataro Wellington, Rotorua, Kirikiriroa Hamilton, Tāmaki Makaurau Auckland, Papaioia Palmerston North, Waihopai Invercargill, me Otautahi in Christchurch. The information presented at each hui is exactly the same and will cover our journey to this point, including a quick recap of negotiations and the lead up to the deed of settlement signing, a look at the parliamentary process where our settlement is currently sitting and the potential time frame moving forward, our aspirations, values and principles looking back to 2012 when these were created, and 3 concepts that could make up our future structure. Your feedback and thoughts are really important. What you tell us now will help Tātou Tātou o Te Wairoa land on our direction and approach. We will be canvassing your views for the next 6 months. Today's consultation hui is the first of 3 phases between now and February next year. In November, we will come back to our people with more details and models based on your feedback. Once we have landed on a direction and structure, we will need you to vote on that. For now though, we simply want your thoughts and ideas.
There are a number of people who've guided us, who led us, who provided inspiration for us, who annoyed us, who took us to task, who told us off, but they were all part of the rich tapestry of our journey. And I think that's something we shouldn't forget when we get to the other side. They all contributed, big, little, small, whatever way it was. They created the tapestry. That's what we're looking at today.
Before we talk about our aspirations, values and principles, we are going to take a quick look back at how we arrived at this point. Our journey to settlement. Treaty of Waitangi claims in our district have a long and significant history dating back to the early 1980s. In 2002, iwi and hapu met and decided to work together to progress our claims across the district under the auspices of the Wairoa Working Group. This was the genesis of Te Tira Whakaemi o Te Wairoa. In 2009, Te Tira Whakaemi o Te Wairoa had its mandate approved, which allowed us to negotiate with the Crown. It took a lot of hard work, but Te Tira reached the best deal possible for our iwi and hapu. Our settlement was initialed in May last year and then had one of the highest turnouts during ratification. It was accepted by 96% of those who voted, which is one of the strongest settlement votes to date. Our settlement is now before Parliament. It has been read once and is currently being considered by the Mauri Affairs Select Committee. The committee has heard submissions and held a hearing in Wairoa. We expect the second reading to be in November and a third reading in March next year, where we want as many of our whānau to attend as possible. All going well, the settlement should be given the royal tick of approval next May. This is where we'll receive our recognition and have the agreed assets returned to us by the Crown. We'll now look briefly at the settlement, which includes the Crown apology delivered at our signing last year, an agreed historical account, Crown acknowledgements of treaty breaches, cultural redress that recognises the traditional, historical and spiritual associations people have with whenua and sites owned by the Crown in Aotearoa, and financial and commercial redress that has a total value of $100 million. Further details about the settlement can be found on our website or on page 7 in your information booklet. Once the settlement has made its way through Parliament, tātou o te Wairoa will receive and administer the redress and any future assets. It is an exciting time for our iwi and hapu. Since the deed of settlement signing in November last year, trustees have met monthly in Wairoa. Pānui from those hui are posted on our website. We have been putting together our work plan that is focused on determining the final asset and representation arrangements, which we will go through shortly in more detail. We have also engaged with our neighbouring iwi, the local community, councils and government agencies. We will now focus on the two areas where we want your feedback, thoughts and questions. Firstly, your aspirations, values and principles. There is a whakatauki, ti tiro whakamuri kia mohio ai koe te huarahi, kei mua o a koe. You know not your future until you know your past. In 2012, a series of workshops were held to identify our aspirations as we work towards the settlement. At the time, our kāhui said the aspiration, or moi moia, was to be happy, loving, healthy and wealthy tangata whenua. Kāhui also agreed these values and principles were really important to our iwi and hapu. Mana motu hake, mana moana, mana tangata, mana whenua, manaakitanga, peace and tranquility, tino rangatiratanga, kaitiakitanga, cultural identity, tikanga, Mauri worldview, rangatiratanga, arikitanga, mana rangatira, awhi, rangi mārie, aroha, whakapapa, te reo me ona tikanga. The values were captured in this statement. Aroha, tika, awhi, manaki, rangi mārie, as a driving force in our decision-making and treatment of one another. The ideas, aspirations and initiatives were visionary. Tātou o te Wairoa Trust acknowledges what our whānau, hapu and iwi all said in 2012. We now want to know whether your aspirations, values, principles or expected behaviours have changed, and are we missing anything? What you tell us will refine those ideas and more clearly identify what success looks like for te rohe o te Wairoa. Following our questions and answers session, we will hold a workshop to talk further about this kaupapa.
The challenge for tātou o te Wairoa is the utilisation of what we received in our settlement to ameliorate the circumstances of our people, to support and nurture our kōrero, our tikanga, our reo, and cultural well-being, to support our role as kaitiaki over our taonga, to provide a catalyst for tribal and district development, and to continue, as we have done in the past, to provide a positive contribution to our people, the district, the region and the nation.
E anga whakamua ana te waka, forging a new path. We will now look at 3 asset and representation concepts. Your feedback will help form the basis for developing our post-settlement governance models. There are a range and mixture of potential models. We will use your feedback to work on these models between now and the second round of Engagement Hui in November. The three concepts presented today reflect possibilities at each end of the scale and a middle option. The three concepts are devolution, whakatohatoha, collaboration, mahi tahi, and amalgamation, KOTAHITANGA. Each of these concepts could be applied separately to assets and representation arrangements. It will be possible to incorporate aspects of different concepts in our new PSGE structure. For example, you might like to see more amalgamation in the way assets are held and more devolution in terms of representation, or vice versa. Throughout the rest of this presentation, you will hear the term groupings used. We have not made any determinations about what those groupings could look like. It may be that they are similar to the existing clusters known as our kāhui, or they could be groupings along different lines. Whakatohatoha, or devolution, would potentially mean no ongoing collective entity. Grouping-based representation, where each group is responsible for their own asset management and each grouping receives their own share of assets. There would be no collective decision-making. Under the concept of mahi tahi, collaboration, groupings would work together with a singular entity. With grouping-based representation, a combination of groupings and centralised asset ownership, with collective decision-making while ensuring we retain individual autonomy. The third concept is kotahitanga, amalgamation, one collective entity, where representation is determined by the entity, potentially with no groupings. All assets would be held by this entity, which makes all decisions. It is important to understand these are concepts only. We are not asking you to choose which one fits best for you today. We simply want your feedback. For example, what do you like and why? And have we missed anything? There are a number of different options and possibilities of how these concepts could be structured. Once we have all of the feedback, we will consider that and further develop the concepts to include more detail. We will now look a bit closer at each concept and their pros and cons. All of this information is contained in the information booklet and can be found on our website. The first concept is whakatohatoha, devolution. In this scenario, complete devolution would suggest that all assets are distributed to groupings. The groupings are solely responsible for asset management and no assets would be held by tātou or te Wairoa Trust. Mahi tahi, collaboration might look like this. Groupings hold some assets and are responsible for those. Tātou or te Wairoa Trust would also hold some assets. Together, groupings and tātou decide which assets go where. The third concept is kotahitanga, amalgamation. Complete amalgamation would suggest that all assets are centralised and held by tātou or te Wairoa Trust. Tātou is solely responsible for asset management and no assets are distributed to groupings. We will now look at representation. Under whakatohatoha, more devolution might suggest that groupings decide how they appoint representatives and the decision-making powers of those representatives. Tātou or te Wairoa Trust ceases to exist. Under mahi tahi, to reflect a collaborative approach, groupings might appoint representatives to tātou or te Wairoa Trust. Each grouping decides how they want to appoint their representatives. Under kotahitanga, representation could be decided by voting at large, not by groupings. For example, the people with the most votes would be appointed. Groupings cease to exist.
The hui that was held here at Takitimu Marae enabled the Crown to face the facts about past actions and omissions.
This is a glorious occasion and we've heard today so many reasons why it is. And we must not ever forget any of those things. It is who we are. However, we have spent too long judging our own past, too long judging the actions of our tipuna. And so te arawhiti, is really about symbolizing that part of our past and the need to put it behind us and start to make our way into the future.
Let's now look at the pros and cons of the three concepts. Remember, these are concepts only. They might not reflect our final structure, which could be a blend of all three. We'll start with the pros of whakatohatoha. Whānau are closer to decision-making. Groupings take responsibility for the advancement of their own members and their own projects. More mana motuhake at a whānau and kāinga level. The pros of mahi tahi are whānau participate in decision-making at a grouping level, and that feeds up to tātou o te Wairoa Trust, in a similar way to our current structure. Mahi tahi gives more mana motuhake than the total centralisation concept KOTAHITANGA. It provides the ability for groupings to advance their own projects and the ability to combine resources for regional projects and administration work. Combining some assets achieves economies of scale and more economic clout when dealing with the Crown, local authorities or corporates. There is less duplication, so the resources are not wasted, and a shared vision between groupings is upheld by tātou o te Wairoa Trust. For kotahitanga, grouping assets achieves economies of scale. It is easier for third parties like local councils to work with because it is one single entity, not multiple groupings. Kotahitanga gives greater economic clout when dealing with the Crown, local authorities and corporates. For whakatohatoha, there is the risk of losing cohesion on a regional level. Groupings invest and grow assets alone without a shared vision. Duplication of projects and duplication of administration work would lead to wasted resources. There would also potentially be tension and uncertainty about which assets go to which group. The cons for mahi tahi are complexity of the concept, unlike whakatohatoha and kotahitanga, which are more straightforward. It requires greater consensus between groupings. The cons for kotahitanga are that whānau, hapu and iwi are distant from decision-making. The ability to exercise mana motuhake is limited, and there is potentially a perception that members would be disempowered due to their distance from decision-making. So, those are the three concepts. To see these laid out next to each other and in more detail, go to page 12 of the information booklet or to our website. Let's now recap on the timeline and what we would like to know from you. We are holding our first series of Engagement Hui this month. In November, we will come back to you with further details once we have considered your feedback. November is also when our settlement legislation is likely to be read in Parliament for a second time. In February next year, we plan on holding a ratification process on the special resolutions required by our trust deed, where we will ask you to vote on our potential asset and representation arrangements. In March, the legislation is likely to pass its final reading, with a settlement date in May 2018. That will bring to an end over 30 years of mahi on this important kaupapa. However, it is just the beginning of our new era. By the end of July 2018, we will need to complete the amendments to the trust deed by special resolution, and in October there will be new trustee elections. So, as you can see, it is a busy time but an exciting one. You can provide feedback in the workshop shortly through our Facebook page or the feedback form on our website. Remember, you decide on the final asset and representation arrangements. During our second round of engagement, we will seek your further feedback on the proposed models. Then the initial trustees will make recommendations, and all adult registered members will have the opportunity to vote on the special resolutions. So, please check with whānau to ensure they are registered. If not, tell them to head to our website now. We'll now have questions and answers. Before we do, we have the following ground rules. Please respect others and remain quiet so that their question can be heard clearly. Please identify yourself when you speak, as we have to record your name in our meeting minutes. Please keep questions related to the aspirations, values and principles, or the three concepts outlined today. For other matters, please talk to one of your representatives who are here today. Nō reira, from all of us at Tātou o te Wairoa Trust, ngā mihi, Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Mauri ora.
Obviously, we've seen the presentation. It may start to stimulate some interesting conversations regarding what now, what happens in terms of the settlement. So, obviously, this is the first of those, say, 3 engagement huis that we're planning on running. So, we want to obviously get everyone invigorated and involved in this process. It's everyone's decision that we want you all to make and help contribute to making this decision. So, hopefully, it's sometimes you look around the room and you look at some puzzle faces about kind of what we're trying to do here. It's something that's probably not happened before. A lot of treaty settlements have their PSG structure set up. It's a continuation of the same structure in the pre-settlement phase. We clearly had that distinction of drawing the line and separating pre- and post-settlement entities out. And at a point in time where we could have the opportunity to develop something unique that's reflective of our tika and our kawa, who we are, rather than obviously continuation of the same old, same old. So we want our members to give us that feedback to develop that model that's going to best represent everyone's interests. Yeah. So that's where we're at. We had a discussion on where the treaty settlement process, where we're going forward, and obviously the process we need to involve everyone in. So what that'll do is in that context, we'll go to Q&A, so short Q&A about basic questions on how we got to here, why we're here, and the process going forward. Obviously some people have some thought around the concepts and the values and principles. We want to save all that to the workshop. But if you've got some general questions of you don't understand how we got to here and what we're going forward, we're happy to answer those now in terms of clarifying some of those for you.
And we've got 2 microphones here. One's for the chair. We have a young lady at the back there. There's Melissa right at the back. So when you speak into the microphone, just make it clear and loud so Melissa can get your name and your question. First question is always the hardest.
A tēnā rā te whānau. Nā tāku te ASPIRATI tēnei no te māhia. O ti rā e ngā whakapapa toro nei aku ki ngā katoa o te rohe rā. E taku whanaunga o te reinga ngā mihi Wairoa whānau nuhaka anei te whānau nēpea mātau tēnei. E hara noa he tino pātai, engari ngā mihi. E ngā mihi kau tai koutou ki te wāhi nai nei, e tino māramana nā kōrero, tino māramana e ngā mea tohu i a koutou i a mātou nei. Nō reira ngā mihi, koutou i runga ngā tūranga a tā tātou nei tūpuna o te rohe nei, ngā mihi. E kāre torotia ngā kōrero e engari, e pirangi au ki te whakamārama atu a kunei whakaaro ke tahi ngā momoia i whakatakoto mai koutou i mui a tātou aroaro nei. Koutou hoki o te whānui e rongo nei ana kōrero mō ngā paha te whakaata me ngā rerenga hoki o ngā huatanga mo te technology e nai nei ngā mihi koutou. First of all, just wanted to congratulate the trustees for bringing this knowledge to us. This is an opportunity that a lot of other post-settlement groups throughout the motu haven't had, to have a national spread of consultation. So I wanted to congratulate you for this. Usually these are quite simulated within 4 walls. So he tino mihi tēnei. And it's not an easy task. There's always going to be some moaners that say they didn't get included in this. But e ngā rohe hei hui koutou ki ngā kanohi mo tātou whanaungatanga ngā mihi. Hoki ngā whakaaro ki te kupenga te huki, e taure here i a tātou, pēnei tā koutou kohi ngā whakaaro, ngā mihi. Just looking at the 3 models in respect to, and I don't want us to jump the gun because I know you've got a schedule for the day, but reflecting on other post-settlement groups that have been successful, and we're here in a rohe that has done that. They're sitting on over $1 billion economy that have grown a similar settlement to ours. And just to learn from these groups. Torona hoki nā ringa rātou kia tātou nei. And they are willing to help us. And I've heard this kōrero myself working in the King's office and hearing the kōrero mo te taumata o Tainui Waikato nei. that they're willing to help us navigate the best decisions around here, because I don't think the three solutions are the only solutions. And we've learnt that that's how they started, thinking that a simplistic choice model was the way forward, but it's cost them 20 years of rewriting the model, readdressing it, and it's not an easy task to change once the train starts rolling. Pūtea always creates anxieties. So I think if we can have the flexibility to be able to have that when we develop the constitutions behind what sits behind the choices, and I think that therein sits the paramount task of thinking, where do we want to be in 50 years and 100 years? Not so much where do we want to be in 20 years, because a 20-year Raupatu settlement just didn't seem that long ago. So I think thinking forward, that the models that seem to appear to be working is not so much the devolution models, because it would be amiable to agree that to reduce the duplication of services can save, we were looking at 28 to 30% of total budget, and so in this case here 28 to 30 million, it's easy to work it on a 100 million budget, could end up being burnt straight into support services. But if we were to spread that across amicably, then and everyone benefit from the shared services, so discounting that one straight away, but a bridge between the two other models that we have here between the collaborative and the centralisation seems to be the more logical sense working forward. My background's in management, and like I said, the hardest things to change is when a train is moving forward. You've got to do the training now before the tracks go out. And I think my suggestion would be to find a balance between collaboration and centralisation. And the way that that could be done is by what we've seen in the other major settlement groups, and we're talking TAHI, Waikato and others, is that there is a split between social services and commercial services. And that truly has, but overarching is the control of the assets united to give the total clout. And I'm in agreement that when you go to negotiate with the likes of local government and national government on kaupapa and take, and like now back home we've got rocket shooting into space. I mean, that train shot across, so it's pretty hard to negotiate back into that space, space being the pun. But, you know, we have our oceans and so forth that are also part of these post-settlement assets. So I think a social arm of development and having its pure focus in there, and having an economic development arm whose job is just to simply develop that fund. And now we're seeing the 100 to 200 to 300% growth happening over the period of time, and that hasn't happened easily. That's been growths of between 6 to 20%. And those are significant gains when you can get a return on investment in that area there. So I think a suggestion to consider, and some solid reasoning behind it, is to separate, have an overarching kauhanga nui or kahui ariki to manage the assignment of those assets to help build equity in social development. Ngā kura, ngā wānanga, ngā tomo mohaere ki tēnā kaupapa, ki te whānake ana ngā oranga mo ta hāpuri katoa. Huri no ki tēnei tahawa te kete, o rātou whakaaro ki te whakanui te pūtea, ki whakaoranga anō i ngā kaupapa kararo i te kahui ariki. Nā koena o kunei whakaaro, kei rongi ngā tūmomo haere nā koutou ki te hiahia na ngā pātai whakamārama ki enei kaupapa tāhua kei muia tātou. Kia ora.
Excellent kōrero and feedback there. Just a couple of points to raise. Obviously, we realise that only 30% of our members reside back in Wairoa. There is 70% that don't live there. So part of our process is to get to where our members are, and this is part of what we're doing here now, coming out amongst going around the country to make sure we're engaging with them, presenting ourselves. So that is unique. Obviously, as you said, that the post-settlement governance entities are usually decided within 4 walls and between a certain close group of people. With this time around, we're not trying to preempt that. We haven't come with a predetermination of models. or concepts. So we've left that, well, the trustees have left an open mind about different aspects of how other PSG entities run. That's what we're going to be focusing on the next phase. We're going to go into looking at the other PSG entities, how they structure themselves, how they run, how they operate. That's part of our next part of the process, but obviously we want to get your first rather than going to them and seeking them not predetermined by a concept that they have to come up with. So we want this driven by you, and then we'll compare what everyone else has done, and then come back with some models in the second round of engagement of this is what we've got back from you on your initial feedback, and this is what kind of a combination of everyone else in terms of PSGs that are out there today. So quite good.
Must be key to use that workshop. Here it is.
In terms of the settlement, we got asked yesterday, well, how much is this in terms of the value-wise, obviously. It's good that we're going through this process now for the actual settlement lands in May. So this is a good time frame to have that discussion before the money is actually in the bank and it's locked in, like you say, and then it's harder to change the path. So this is our opportunity is now to have this discussion and work through this program. We're hoping that this will stimulate some discussion about where we want to take this for the future. And as I said, it may need to be a bit more flexible. It'll need to maybe develop over time to get the right model. There is no kind of perfect model. We want this to be our own model, what we're comfortable with, and make sure that's going to deliver the benefits through our aspirations and our principles that we want to see happen. We want to make sure that model, that structure delivers and not deliver something not really want. Basically. So in terms of the cash and the settlement, obviously there's $100 million was what we negotiated with the Crown. A percentage of that we've used to purchase 2 forest half shares and 2 forests with about $7 million. We've taken an on-account payment to get the trust going and operating of $5 million. So that's basically the cash component is $88 million plus those 2 shares. There's some additional cash to come. Obviously we don't know how much interest we've earned on the $100 million while we signed the AFP in 2014. And there's also some cleaning out of rentals from forests that we're in. So it'll be up around that $100 million in terms of the financial component.
Ko Denise Jarden, ahau, ko Rō mai wahine, tōku iwi. My thoughts are, I like the idea of us looking at what the successful iwi have, how they've managed their funds, but I think it's also quite important to look at the other side, because there's been iwi that have lost all their money through, we don't really know, and I just want to bring up that I think it's important for us to look at what caused failure too. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Really good point.
Hey, kia ora mai. Kia ora Campbell, rongo mai wahine. Te māhere mai tawiti. Kia ora koe rā. Ko tērā whakaro, tērā wāo kōrero. Koe hia tau kia mātou e whawai mō tēnei mea. I roto rongo mai wahine. Live there, born there, bred there, live there, and run for rongo mai wahine. All my life. Got pohara over it too, but it doesn't matter. With this thing, I looked at the devolution, but I also looked at collaboration in the middle. Because of where we are in our position in Nongo Mai Wahine at the moment, to go total KOTAHITANGA is a bit hard for us to swallow. After all those years of whawhai, and like he said, the rocket went right over our heads. But they are talking with us now. So that's why we whakaro with I don't agree you on that. It's good to look at other people, but
I've been to many places, even to those huis or kaumātua iwi forums, and it doesn't seem to work like that, looking at other people's progress in life. Like you say, there are mistakes, and we should look at those as well. So going on your own is been to be the take at the moment. I mean, who else can tell Wairoa what to do? But Wairoa, you know, it's the same as me and all my way. I'd like to have a say in something, but kia ora, that is only my opinion. And tēnā koe, tēnā koutou katoa.
Further questions?
Kia ora koutou, ko Ruth tōku ingoa nā me uria o Rongo Wahine. It seems to be all over the place today. I just want to say, as a mum of young, my babies are only young, I tautoko what our rangatira matua keke over here said about making sure that while we are looking at the assets and the growth and having that side looked after and growing that, having that social side as well. Because I live in Hamilton because I can't afford to live at home. I live in Hamilton because this gives me the education opportunities for my babies that I can't get at home. And I would love to be at home. I would love to take my babies home and bring them up at MAHI, you know, where my grandmother grew up. But that's not an opportunity for me at the moment. It's not an option financially, but not so much financially, it's the other things. It is the education side. You know, it is, like here, I can send my babies and they can be, so they are tainui, they're tainui as well as rongo wahine, and they can be educated in tainuitanga. You know, that is one of my biggest aspirations, I think, is to have a kahungunitanga, rongo wahinetanga, mātauranga in Wairoa, and having the capability to know that we've got these people sitting over here looking after growing that pūtea to awhi this side, to give them those opportunities so that when their time comes, just like on the marae, they will move from social into that side. These people can sit back and watch the fruits of their labour grow, and then we have the next lot, the next generation coming in, taking over those social opportunities. Yeah, just like at the marae, you know, go in the kitchen, get at the front. You know, but you have to earn it, and I get that. But yeah, so I tautoko that, you need to look at both sides of the coins there, looking after the pūtea, because it is important, but also looking after what can we do for my babies and my mokos and my mokos, because more than likely, I may not see the fruits of this, 20 years of raupatu, and 20 years later they're just getting it. Tainui's doing awesome at the moment, taking them 20 years to get there. So maybe my kids will see it, maybe my grandkids. So that's my own whakaaro. Kia ora.
There's a couple of points there. We're coming up with this idea that it's the settlements for our children's children. We might not see the fruits of it now. Potentially in this devolution, amalgamation spectrum, we could say that devolution, we're going to divide the settlement of everyone who can get immediate benefit by getting a cheque and hand out. So we've ruled that out, complete devolution of individuals. Or on the other side, we can take that 100 million and make $1 billion out of it, but not benefit from it for the next 20, 30 years because it's just all making money. There's no delivery of the social aspirations and all those type of educational aspirations that we need to happen now to make sure we can get forward into the future. So we've taken all this on board, and it's clearly, it's all positive and good feedback that we're receiving. So, choice. Another one.
Kia ora tātou, ko Hilaman Tangiora tōku ingoa, he uria hau mō tēnei rohi. Just a few comments probably, I really congratulate you, ngā mea tū kau koutou. What you've presented today is very clear. There's a lot of clarity, a lot of thinking going on to it, and it's very, I think it's enough information to make sense of what's happening. I think, it's very good. I'm lucky enough, most of the successful tribes to date, 20 years they've been settled, and to be honest, this is just my whakaaro. 20 years ain't that long, you know. It ain't, to see cycles in life and see things change. I mean, how many 20-year-olds you know who are super onto it? Not too many, probably, but I think it's really complex and really, really challenging. You know, I worked with Ash's wife and Ashley's wife and also Blue. You know, I've been at Tiny Group Holdings for 4 years now, and it's hugely complex and lots of challenges. You know, and I think we just got to. Some things that I'm observing is that we got to make sure that, well, whatever we do reflects us, you know, and doesn't reflect what a Fonterra board might look like or whatever, you know, like that. Sometimes there's very Pākehā ways of doing things. I don't think they always work in my whakaaro, but as long as it reflects us. But I do like what they have done here, some of the things they have done. They've got a really good smart boards with smart commercial people on them who can help to remove barriers in places that we don't have influence into, and so I think that's a really good thing. But I just want to acknowledge that it's hugely complex, and then there's lots of challenges. And you know, I mean, 100 million sounds like a lot, but it's not really. You know what I mean? And if we split it up 7 ways, for example, there's 14 million. What can you do with that? Nothing, not much. You know. So sorry, it's not here, but I just think we're going to be really, really careful, really smart, wrap the best brains around the problems, and then seek to understand what they look like for ourselves, and come up with good solutions. And you know. Whether separately, to me, to be honest, doesn't sound like a good idea. I know it's the things that Ash talked about, scale. It's hard to do those things well individually, and to actually get scale and to invest, and then also working all together to get consensus to make good decisions. Again, you look at things like Te Kauanganui, Te Whakakitenga or Waikato, there's a new, you know, where every marae is represented, but still things are very slow, and then they get, to be honest, I hope I don't get a poke in the eye, but you know, tribal Māori politics can be really painful, you know, and I hope not to replicate some of those things as long as all of us are authentic and true and really want the best. Those EQ things are kind of harder to discover about people until they're actually doing the mahi. Technical skills are one thing, and having the right aroha and right heart and right approach is another thing. You know, I think all I'm saying, I don't have any answers, all I'm saying is really complex, but I like the Hemi atu ka koutou for good information you've given us today is very clear, and it's a good way. Yeah, so that's all. Ngā mihi.
Yeah, further questions? We break to the workshop.
Tēnā koutou ngā mihi atu ki a koutou I tūki te whāriki hi ngā kōrero I mui a mātou I tēnei rā. Ko te ahirangi tangi ora hau, rongo mai wahine rākai pāka I ne manuhiri, te Wairoa katoa. I heard some good discussion, and I like the idea of people talking about growing the asset base financially, and also looking at the social climb as well. I think one of the problems we have on MAHI is the environmental issues as well. And we're getting a lot of land lost into the sea, for example, with rising waterways and things like that. So I would like to see, because I don't really have a question, that we make sure that we look at a balance of environment, social aspects, which are huge and must be huge. Ki te tautoko hau I tēnei, kōrero pāniki ngā kāinga o te mahi. There aren't any houses for us, we've got to build our own. If we go back there financially, it's very difficult, as well as the asset. But looking at your values here, I think those are good. They give us a grounding and they give us a focus. And I'm glad that they've been settled on. I don't have any problems with any of those. We need to grow forward and work forward and move forward under the auspices of those strategies. This is our strategy, really. But the other things, you're right. As this young man, my son, sort of pointed out, it's a complex issue and it needs the right people to have it. And I think that's a question in time. I've studied the Waikato business model that they've promoted, and it's interesting to see what they've done, and now they've changed it, and they'll probably look at changing it again in the near future. Nō reira, ngā mihi kia koutou, ngā mihi kia tātou, tēnā koutou.
Be a straightforward process. Obviously, we acknowledge that those that have settled before us will have this. We all face the same issues. So how can we deliver great asset and then deliver the benefits that we need to? And it's going to need to be a balance, obviously, between some commercial activities, environmental issues that we may need to take care of. And yeah, so it's a big job, but our trustees are here to start on that journey, present the initial information to you, encourage you to provide feedback and provide those who are not registered to get involved.
Kia ora tātou, Brendan Taurua Taurua. Tautoko all the kōrero that's taken place so far, it's really good. We've got some brains in our whānau, it's good. Oh, I love my whānau. Thinking about what you put down for cons for those different structures in place, and I saw one thing that came up there as a con for devolution. Collaboration was to do with dealing with local government. See, my thing, tautoko uncle as well, where he brought up the environmental stuff. That's been my passion for the last 5, 6 years, 7 years even. And getting things to work on the ground means having to deal with that council. And I think it is good to have a one body to deal with that, because that's the way they work. They don't like working with little groups. If they did, we wouldn't be settling with iwi, you know, so but that's how it is. So my whakaaro is, if we look after the land looks after us. That's what I think. And I think we see it with climate change. Stuff is going on, it's happening. One of the key things that I saw throughout my whole studies was the balance between the economic and the environment. We do this big push for this money and stuff. Really looking to the future. And I had this sort of kōrero with one of the Mauri advisory guys to the Environmental Protection Authority when they brought their whakaaro around here about a mandate to allow them to make decisions on the entire surrounding economic zone around the country. And he says to me, it's all about making money. If it has an environmental benefit, we'll hold that up to the public to say that's why we've made that decision. But if it's not making money, it's not gonna achieve it. And I think, and I said to him, bro, when you're living in the jungle, when it gets to that point, and you've got $1 million in your pocket, and the tiger jumps out in front of you, I don't think he's interested in your money. You know, and the point that I'm making is, money is an important thing, but looking at the future with what's really going on, I think it's really, really important to look after the land part of it. So to see investments going into forestry and stuff, that's a good thing. Ka pai. Yeah, building that whenua asset base. I think the collaboration needs to take place between all iwi that are making these settlements. We're settling well under the mark, not even 10% of what these claims are worth. And we've got to go from that to somehow claiming back all that we lost. And that's going to take collaboration with other iwi and stuff. So again, tautoko uncle, tautoko cuz over here, looking at the social aspects and stuff. And then we've got to do something about the cultural stuff, you know, and so tautoko cuz. Maintaining our identity, setting ourselves apart from Pākehā in the way that they deal with these sort of matters. And yeah, ka pai whānau, really great job. Congratulate you. Thank you very much. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa.
I think wealth can be measured in different terms, not just value on dollars or the bank balance. You know, how prosperous are we in other aspects, cultural, our dignity. That's, you know, there will be a balance between all those to make sure we can move ahead forward and the supportive side.
So just to follow on from your whakaro, just to reinforce where that relates to the conversation we're having today, back to devolution. So currently I work with our trustees, which is in a complex environment its own. So I'm also a councillor in Napier City, so I work in local territorial authority. And our trust board has also asked me to represent you on the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. So I'm currently working on our behalf in the local territorial authority space. So while we may have an ambition to, as a whānau, some of us who may want to work towards devolution, your whakaro is quite correct in that the people that I currently also work with, they're not interested in devolution, and they are driven primarily by economic benefit, and environment is down the bottom, even with the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. As we get proposals coming across the table, that it has to have social benefit. Well, first and foremost, it has to have economic benefit, then social, and then environmental is way down the bottom of the list. If these other things are held up, which they are with our partners outside of Te Ao Māori, and while we may want to look at a structure that works for us, we also have to remember that whatever structure we pick today has to be able to work collaboratively with those that aren't interested in the same philosophies that drive us. Just how it relates to our core.
Another key part of our settlement is a lot of relationship agreements, because obviously value relationships, whether they're working within councils, in with them, or to there's a strong partnership agreement then. So we value, obviously, partnerships, but we also realise that we're going to need to partner up with other iwi, because obviously, as I said, 70% of our members live outside in other areas, so it would be wise for us to partner up. If they're delivering the same social services that we're trying to achieve, let's partner up with them and let them deliver, and our members can go and participate through their programs, and the vice versa. Those living in our lobby, we could look after them. So there is a value in collaborating and thinking collectively for this, trying to get the win.
Kia ora whānau. My name is Terence Mauri Jr. I'm aware that we're going to have a workshop after that we can get into the nuts and bolts of this thing, so I don't want to get into that too much, but I just want to say thank you to our trustees, whānau, for getting us to this point. It's pretty innovative that you didn't try and settle on what that governance structure and the asset allocation looks like in the beginning, and yeah, thank you for considering the whānau and holding that up so that we can really have a robust discussion about that, eh? But ngā mihi, eh? Thank you very much.
Just obviously our pre-settlement entity was restricted by Crown policy, so that's why we ended with tātou with the Wairoa Trust. Obviously the Crown has certain requirements that it likes to see in PSG entities, so it has confidence in what it's settling with and who it's settling with. So we took all the boxes. Now we move into the post-settlement phase. Those Crown policies are not with us. They're in the past. It's up to us now to decide on what our framework is and what the PSG should operate within. Not with Crown policy, they're gone. It's our members to decide what's the priorities, what it should look like in terms of values and aspirations.
Kia ora tātou. Moana Henry e taku ingoa. Ngati kuru pakiaka te hapu. I suppose, total ngā mihi kua mihia. I want to talk about building the capacity. You mentioned that we've got 34,000 potential, and we've got 6,000 registered. I suppose, and the groupings also you mentioned around the representation. And I do know that there's been nominations for Pākeke in terms of a grouping. And I'm just wondering, so we've got that element, I'm just wondering what there is, if there's any thinking around a rangatahi in those groupings, because I think they need a voice as well.
Yep. Definitely. Obviously, currently you may be aware that our trustees are going through a process of their kahui nominating for kaumātua kahu council. Obviously, that's pertaining with our trustees. We have to have that council operating. Obviously, the purpose of that kaumātua kahui is to look at the te reo, tikanga, whakapapa, and those aspects, but also provide us, the trustees, with some guidance if there is potential conflicts or other aspects that the trustees may feel they need to refer to. So that's one kind of requirement we need to do. The rangatahi one, we've had this discussion as well. It's been brought up at other hui that, you know, that's another aspect that we need to look at in terms of way forward, and that'd be reflected in the current structure. So we've taken all that on board and looking at how best we could incorporate some kind of committee or structure there for the rangatahi.
Absolutely, there has to be a rōpū or a voice for rangatahi like you and a few others in here.
Those further questions, I think I've got an opportunity now to hand it over to Janina Syme to be running the workshop. You'll see a lot of posters around the walls, and these are kind of the nuts and bolts of what we're looking to do. The feedback we need to do. So, thank you.
I'll try not to make it too boring. I just want to take you back a little bit. We've had the background to the settlement, and I still see some people here today that were here in July last year when we came back, when we came around the first time. And that's awesome to see, so you would know the pipeline that we had to go through. Yeah. So, like one lady had mentioned over here, there was, obviously knows a little bit about the tree settlement. Usually once you've signed the deed of settlement, the government or the Crown, they want to push you into getting the PSGE up and going straight away. But because of the whawhai we've had for 30 years, the past 30 years, we didn't want to go straight into developing the PSGE. For two reasons. We wanted to slow everything down, absolutely, for 2 years. And the second thing was we wanted to come back to you and say, what we're hearing at our table and in our hui that we've had with our iwi, with our clusters, is that they want total devolution, they want to do some things together, but they still want some things at home. And we've also heard it's better if we do amalgamation. You're going to get bigger bucks that way. You're going to get bigger relationships that way. So that's why we've come back to you with three concepts, ideas, draft intent, a draft plan. We didn't have to do that, eh? We could have, like someone said in this room, gone behind four walls and done it all ourselves and come back to you and said, this is what we're going to do as your PSGE. But that's not the way Wairoa wants to do anything. We want to do it differently, uniquely, and you know the kōrero that you brought back to us today, absolutely awesome. I don't even think we need to go into a workshop. Maybe just to tidy up a little bit about our values and our principles. Because we don't perceive to know all about that. Anyway, we'll start with AMALGAMATION, and I think we need to read that. Oh, is it up there?